Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Navigator podcast, where we believe in the body's ability to heal itself. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Brian Strickland, the producer of the show, and today we're going to be talking about supplementation. We'll cover some of the basics of supplementation and the purpose it serves, plus Ed will be sharing his personal supplement regimen, which is somewhere in the ballpark of nearly 70 pills a day. So let's say hello really quick to your host, Mr. Ed Jones. Ed, what's up? How are you doing today?
Good afternoon, Brian. I'm doing quite well, and I am excited to share today one of the more common questions which I rarely ever answer in person, which is, what do you take, Ed, as far as supplements? But I don't really have I can't just spill off mentally, oh, here's the 72 supplements I take, because I actually have to take pictures of them to remember it myself. Now, I will say this is how I arrange it before I get into the reasons why I do it and the exact products that I use. I do my pills 1 week at a time. I will spend usually Sunday evening with little baggies, and I will line up all of my supplements, and then I will make up the baggies for that week. That's the first thing. Secondly, I do believe in taking it in divided doses. Whatever blood levels you achieve within 2 hours of a supplement, unless they are oil soluble, you probably will be completely depleted within 8 hours. So it makes total sense to take most of your supplements morning and supper, or if you felt they were affecting your sleep, do it morning and lunch. And so I carry these baggies around very easily. I've been doing this for decades, many decades.
I think it's important to say that this is one of those things that you have to be really intentional about. Just like most things, that are health related, planning, you have to do it. That's its purpose, just like meal preps or anything like that, if you're wanting to eat healthy. And so actually planning out when you have that many and then being sure that you take them with you is really important.
It's not going to happen on its own. And you're exactly right. In fact, you just discussed how you're organizing your email life. In this complex world of ours, you will be eaten alive with all of these handcuffs of technology and life and chaos if you don't put it in order. And that's one of those is, thinking about what you're going to eat during the day too. But the supplements are huge as far as having that organized. If you think you're going to get up every morning and get your little bottles out, generally that won't happen consistently.
Let's go ahead and dive into the purpose of supplementation. Now, I think it may be somewhat obvious to people, but for you personally, why is it that you take that many supplements?
Well, first off, most things that have ever been written, spoken, or taught, and especially in medical school, we're looking at nutrients to overcome deficiency diseases. That is the minimal part of why I supplement. Because we really don't have people walking around with scurvy and rickets and all the old diseases that were created by gross deficiencies. Now, I do believe we have subclinical deficiencies, but we don't have those ones that are devastating the physical and mental parts of our bodies. So I think we can definitely eat super healthy foods consistently and not be deficient in almost anything. That's really the smallest part of why I supplement. In fact, if you wanted to just take 1 or 2 supplements, you could probably feel very secure that you're not going to be deficient. Here's the reason why most people, even people 30 plus, may want to consider the heavier duty therapeutic supplement protocol like I do. And before I even say that, no one has to take 72 pills. So don't think that I'm putting this out there like the goal. We actually talked, and before I get into the specifics of it, something called the Core 5. I've learned over 40 years, if you just will do these 5 things, you don't really have to, unless you're on my plane of thinking, you don't have to embrace anything other than this. The Core 5 is a great multivitamin, not the big box Centrums. A multivitamin made from food. Omega-3, definitely one that's been tested to not have heavy metals. Probiotics, that is, we've done several of our comments throughout all of our episodes tend to go back to the gut health, and that's part of this. A green drink. Green drinks are not something like just kale. It's actually organic, multiple mixture of these different greens to help in many, many areas that I really don't have time to discuss right now, but it's imperative. And then lastly is vitamin D. Most people need 5,000 units. If you only did that, you're looking at one drink and 5 pills, and you would be far better off than 99% of the population. So if you are a beginner, you don't want to get too much into this, find someone who can help you with this core 5 list.
Yeah. And that's really a great starting point, unless you're really wanting to target something specific, right?
Well, unless you really are embracing what we call, aging gracefully, and the empowering yourself to the very highest level. And my goal is not to live a lot of extra years, because I truly think that somehow we are modestly programmed that regardless of what we do, you're not going to add extensive years to kind of the machine. Mm-hmm. And I do know we can take away significant years, but I'm not sure if we can add to them. What we all want, or most people want, is quality. We don't want to be the average 62-year-old who is hobbling around with aches and pains and, depressed and not enough energy, all that, with medications they're having to be taking from their doctor. And that's the goal of me, is to not be in that place. So it's not about deficiencies. That's not why a person like me would do 72 pills. What it is about is a new disease that I just created and named, called FTD. I know some of the younger people may not remember this, but FTD was always the florist that you went to when you were younger, and even online you could order flowers. Well, it's not the flowers. FTD stands for Father Time Disease. And you know what? People think aging is normal. It's now been coded through the World Health Organization that aging is a disease. Now, we all are going to get older. There is no fountain of youth. But what there is, when we look at cultures around the world who truly are living in the environments that our physical chemistry was more aligned with, is that the aging doesn't happen really significantly until they hit about 70 to 80. Guess what? Look around at Walmart right now at the 50-year-olds hobbling and pale colors and terrible complexions and hair that's all fallen out. No, we have turned the hands of the clock the wrong direction by 3 decades. It can stop if you do the right things. And supplements is not the whole piece to the puzzle, but today that's all we're talking about.
Right.
So what we're wanting to do is figure out if anyone hearing this makes sense to, that aging is accelerated right now quicker than any time in the history of mankind. I mean, it's normal to age, but it's not normal to age at an excessive rate. And I'm not going to get into it with any biochemistry or anything super technical, but there's a part of your cell called the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the engine within each cell that takes your foods, your nutrients, and turns it into ATP, which is gasoline, similar to gasoline for your engine in your car. That's what burns and produces horsepower. Well, that's the same thing in you. And the average 90-year-old has lost 96% of its mitochondrial function. Mm. And as you age, you're going to lose more and more. And if you don't do things correctly, you're going to lose it quicker. Now, imagine that you have an airplane that has 100 cylinders on it. And when you're 15 years old, that airplane is flying with all 100 cylinders operating very efficiently. Well, by age 30, you've gone down to about 85. And by 50, you're at about 65. Well, it starts going a lot faster after age 50. You have a difficult time restarting those cylinders if you wait too long. But we can do it and preserve it far better than we can fix it. So that's what this whole protocol is about, is slowing the aging process down. If you want to read a book that's absolutely the best explanation for mitochondria and what it does to devastate our health, including increasing cancer rates significantly, it is called Tripping Over the Truth. In fact, I just talked to Dr. McCullough 2 podcasts ago. We both agreed it was one of the best books ever written on this subject. You know, I fly small airplanes, and I go past this, what I call the airplane graveyard, which I did yesterday morning when I flew. These airplanes, there's a certain number that sit out on the ramp, and they simply don't fly because of whatever reasons. Remember this, everyone. Very few of us wear out, we rust out. And when I say we rust out, it truly is like the rust on these airplanes. And it is difficult to fix rust. Many times the airplane has to be thrown in the junkyard or sold for pieces. You can fix worn out parts. You cannot fix the terrible damage that occurs with rust.
So what are some of the major contributors to rust in the body?
That's a great question. Two of the biggest factors is chronic inflammation, and secondly is the combination of rising and unstable insulin and blood sugar. Those two are what cause more and more of this rusting within us. Now, that isn't all of the parts to the puzzle of aging. And in fact, I came up with an acronym that I think fully addresses the whole system of declining health as far as father time and aging. And if you think of a tomb, we don't want to really be in a tomb. We want to live a long time. So the acronym is TOMBLESS, TOMBLESS. So here we go. Real quickly, T, toxins. We have to lead a relatively clean life, but the biggest part of toxins is opening the body's ability to discard them. When you ride behind a diesel bus and you breathe those fumes, something has to happen within you, or those fumes in a toxic way will reside in your fatty cells and poison you. How do we do that? Supplements. It's not going to happen with your food, people. Secondly, the O of Tombless. We must optimize the insulin. Insulin's job is multifaceted. One is to store food for later. That's why people with high insulin can't lose weight. Secondly, it creates damage to the cells. We want and desire and need insulin levels to be at 3 or below. Third, M, the microbiome. You know, we all seem to probably know that word now, which means that it's the bacteria that resides in the gut lining. It is not easy to put it in nor keep it in. One reason is glyphosate, which is sprayed on all foods. Glyphosate is Roundup and is truly an antibiotic. Fourth, B, blood flow. You know, it doesn't really matter if your car is brand new. If there is some blockage in the fuel line, it's not going to run. And that's exactly the same of whether you take your supplements and eat healthy food. If there's some decreasing blood flow to certain organs or body parts, the good stuff won't get to the cells. And that means that you will be compromised. L is lower your inflammation. Inflammation is at the root of all chronic diseases. When I say all, I mean almost 100% of everything you don't want to get as far as aging is based in chronic inflammation. The arthritis, the memory loss, the aches and pains, the plaque in your arteries, the wrinkles in your skin.
Yeah.
All of this is happening.
There's plenty of evidence to support that now.
And exactly right, Brian, because 10 years ago, we were laughed at for saying that inflammation is at the root of this. But really, Alzheimer's is just the brain on fire and so many other things. So the supplement protocol, along with all of the other parts of the puzzle, but the supplement protocol is imperative because you're taking natural anti-inflammatories. And that is a key part of slowing this process. E for exercise. We all know that if there's a fountain of youth ever to be found, it is in the area of exercise. Here's the catch, though. Guess what happens when you exercise too much? You create more rust in the body unless you do the right supplement protocol. If you go to my podcast on exercise and fitness, you will hear me explain how to protect yourself from too much exercise. Next is the last two S's. One is supporting optimal cell function. Guess what, people? The thing that makes your cells communicate and has the valves that click on and off to put nutrients in and discard waste out is the fatty layer that surrounds every single cell. Guess what that's made of? Fat. Guess what most people's made of in their body? Unhealthy fat, because the cell can only build what you eat. And if you're eating fats that have omega-6 and fried foods and you're not taking omega-3, you have inferior cell walls. And inferior cell walls mean it's not going to communicate as well. It's not going to get rid of toxins. It's not going to shuttle the right nutrients within the cell. So support optimal cell function is critical. I've seen 2 people out of probably the last 2,000 that I looked at optimal blood testing for omega-3s that did it with food alone. They were eating 1 entire can of sardines per day, and they did do it without supplements. I don't want to rely on that. Lastly, here's a huge one. The last S of Tuneless is silence the genes. We are made of genetic material called genes. Those are blueprints. They actually send information to make certain things happen. Well, guess what? We don't have the on button on most of our genes. A lot of them are silent until they need to become active for a short period to preserve something, to protect us, to activate. And then if you're ideally healthy, they will go back into silent mode. The problem is, in the world we live in, with the chaotic, toxic levels that we are introducing within ourselves, some of these genes get kicked on and then they don't know where the off button is. And then stuff happens like more inflammation. Cells turn into unhealthy cells, which we know what that means. And then there's no stopping them. And then you wake up one day and you get the call from the doc that we need to look further. Your test results are questionable. And sometimes you can reverse it and sometimes you can't.
All right, Ed, so now that we've gone through the whole acronym, can you take us through maybe each letter and tell us what it is that you take personally for each of those?
I can. I'm going to define generally what I take for each of the acronyms of Tuneless. Now, there will be a list at the end of that really doesn't fit into any specific category, so I'll cover that at the end. However, first off, Tuneless, the first is toxins. We have to open our channels or else we will be self-poisoning. I don't care how good of a life you lead. What are those things that I totally, absolutely have observed, not only in myself, but in many people that work? One is Dr. McCullough makes a wonderful liver support because the liver has a system called the P450. That is the critical part of how we get rid of the things that are poisoning us. It has NAC and milk thistle twice a day, every day. Kyolic, the only garlic that I truly know is friendly to my body. Many brands don't like me. It is odorless and it has the bulk of clinical research that supports its use on an everyday basis. So I do that every day because of the fact it does help reduce toxins again. Thirdly, Lipo C. Any vitamin C will be helpful. You can buy the cheapest of the cheap. That's one of the few times you will hear me say that. I don't care. You could go probably to Dollar General and get vitamin C and it's still going to be beneficial, but don't do that with other nutrients. Lipo C is fat soluble. That means it stays longer. You're not urinating it out. I do use a product called calcium glucarate. Most people have never heard of that. What that does, especially as a man ages, it allows some of the estrogens to be excreted. Estrogen, as we get older, is a demon to us over 50. You can have more body fat accumulation, less libido. It competes with testosterone. I do it twice a day. So that's the big bulk of the toxin supplement protocol. Second, to optimize insulin. And again, if you listen to my other podcast, I bet on half of them, I'm talking about how we have to manage insulin. And I really suggest you get a blood test. If your doctor is not willing or your nurse practitioner, go to our product page and order an insulin test from directlabs.com. The numbers on the reference ranges are inaccurate, people. Don't believe those. If you want to age gracefully, you need to have it under 3. Now, so optimize insulin. I use berberine twice a day. It is an amazing herb with tons of clinical research for helping to optimize your blood sugar and insulin. Don't be confused. Glucose is not insulin significantly. They are kissing cousins, but that doesn't mean you could have healthy glucose and unhealthy insulin or vice versa. I use a product by Terry Naturally, who I love his company, and it's called Sucontrol. And it is an herb that helps to control and manage blood sugar levels, which again can fall back on helping insulin too.
And that's not berberine, right? That's
not
different.
Berberine. Second ingredient, and it's an unusual herb, and I just do it morning and night. And then thirdly, omega-3s, and that is critical to this managing of inflammation and blood sugar. The key to omega-3s is this. You have to get a brand that has been fully tested to not have heavy metals. Secondly, you always try to add on the back of the bottle, it will say 2 active ingredients, EPA and DHA. You want 2,000 milligrams when you add those together. Some brands you can do that with 2 to 3 pills, and other brands you may have to do 6 to 8. I would certainly use the ones you have to do less pills. And if you ever burp them, it means that you need to find another brand. It doesn't mean it's terrible brand always, but sometimes the burping can indicate some rancidity going on. So I'm not real happy with brands that do that. Fourthly, B, blood flow. On blood flow, many, and we're not talking about the diet here, which we talked about plenty. You have to have a healthy diet now. Don't think that I'm saying these pills will replace healthy eating. They won't. They're adding into this whole anti-aging and slowing inflammation protocol. But when you get past 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, you're just simply, the old water hose laying in that front yard has kind of gotten dried out and it's gotten gunk in it and it's just not flowing the way it used to. And we need to optimize that. One of my go-tos is nattokinase. Nattokinase is made from an ancient food called natto. It is remarkable. It's one of those nutrients under the radar screen. You rarely hear about it. But what it will do is if you take a dose of quality nattokinase, and when I say quality, you have to know your stuff because there's some junky nattokinase going on, it will within 2 hours create the optimal viscosity of your blood. That means if your blood is operating at too thick a level and you take nattokinase, then you're going to have optimal levels of viscosity. Now, if you are on blood thinners or really if you have any medical conditions and they're significant of any level, you need to ask a educated health practitioner about interactions. Generally, the only interactions that are of utmost concern are of those who are taking blood thinners that are pharmaceutical. And if you are, you would not want to do nattokinase. Now, the other thing about natto is it will not super thin your blood like the pharmaceuticals. It will only bring you back to optimal, which is pretty dang good. Lowering inflammation is the next one. Well, we all know that curcumin is the king of natural anti-inflammatory herbs. And there are many brands out there. Only a few do I really believe in. And the reason is this. In the country of India, where they eat probably more curry than any group of people on this earth, they have their health issues. But one of those that they don't is with Alzheimer's. They have a lower rate. And one reason it is because they eat so much of this curry. And they say when they do autopsies on people in India, their brain is actually yellow, similar to the color of the herb itself. Well, the reason that happens is not because they eat it, because there's people who eat a lot of it here, and it's not working that way. Why is that? You have to cook this herb with fat. If it isn't processed with fat or some carrier, the body basically keeps it in the colon and excretes it, and then you really get very little benefit. Well, there's a few supplement companies that have certainly on top of their game, and they figured out how to do this. And so search for those, and certainly we can help you down the road on making wise choices. But just because it says curcumin or turmeric, which is similar, same herb, but less concentrated, don't trust it. You need to be an informed consumer. And then the two last ones are the 2 S's. Stimulate the optimal cell function. Again, in cells, we have a variety of components. The biggest one is mitochondrial. How do we support that? We support it through 2 different ingredients. One is called coenzyme Q10, or ubiquinol is the basically same thing. This is what the mitochondria runs on. This is what it gets low with as aging occurs. This is what is devastated by statin drugs and sometimes other drugs. When that goes down, mitochondrial dysfunction goes way up. The last one is PQQ. It is the only nutrient that in my memory has been discovered in my lifetime. And it is something to really check into because it plays a role in the mitochondrial function unlike anything else. And so the last one is silencing the genes. A lot of things play a role in active or silencing genes, but the biggest ones in my supplement protocol is there's a gene called MTHFR that creates havoc if it's too overexpressed, and we control it by the use of methylfolate in your B complex. Buy a B complex that has methylfolate. Don't buy one that has folic acid. Folic acid actually can do you harm. We do not recommend folic in anything, including the multivitamin. Secondly, magnesium threonate is something that helps to control the genes within the brain for maintaining memory as we age. And then the next one is pomegranate. Believe it or not, pomegranate has a good affinity for maintaining cell function. And then I'm going to end this because there are certain nutrients that I just can't fit into a category. And I'm going to just read these off because I will probably continue this supplement protocol with slight tweaks over the years. But this will be probably a consistent thing because it's worked for me. It's made my blood work optimal and made me function on the level that I want at almost 62. So the other things not mentioned is an herb called amla, AMLA. When you look at the research on amla, incredible how it keeps cells that are unhealthy from spreading, and it raises your good cholesterol and lowers the one that we don't want. Multivitamin, got to have a good one because nutrition's like an orchestra, and I don't want to just keep adding more bottles. And a good multiple, I do right now use a food-grown multiple that I do twice a day. I do use cranberry with mannose extract twice a day to maintain my purity of less bacteria in the urinary tract, just because it seems to make me feel better. Do prostate support, which is using the Pygeum saw palmetto. I don't use a lot of that. I only use 1 pill per day, and it calls for 2. I just feel like it's best for me. And then the last thing is the hawthorn berry. Again, I really believe in for my heart. I use a product to maintain my testosterone, which is using several herbs, tribulus being one of them that I'm a huge fan of. And then, of course, the probiotics, small amounts of iodine. I tend to agree with Dr. McCullough. I don't think we should be using 12 milligrams and above. I actually only use 1.5 milligrams every day. I'm a massive believer in CBD, doing it twice a day or as needed. There are days when I'm really overwhelmed and I want to calm down, I do more of it. So doing CBD or not sleeping at night. And again, not sleeping, I use GABA. Talked about that on the sleeping podcast. GABA is my lifesaver during the night. And then lastly, DHEA, 20 milligrams in the morning. I need more testosterone. I probably have half of what you have, Brian, because I'm twice as old. So DHEA is the absolute best, safest way to do that without synthetic hormones. Dang, that covered a big list, and I know I went way over. So slap me, but I'm sorry. We had to get it in.
Yeah, no worries at all.
And we are going to post this list fully on the Holistic Navigator. So that does it for today's edition, and thank you for listening. And again, my reminder, Hippocrates, if a doctor cannot do good, he must be kept from doing you harm. Have a healthy and safe day.
The information on this podcast and the topics discussed have not been evaluated by the FDA or anyone of the medical profession and is not aimed to replace any advice you may receive from your medical practitioner. The Holistic Navigator assumes no responsibility or liability whatsoever on the behalf of any purchaser or reader of these materials. The Holistic Navigator is not a doctor, nor does he claim to be. Please consult your physician before beginning any health regimen.